commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
For some, Halloween is a little more serious than candy and costumes. To give your Hallows Eve a truly frightening feeling, turn on Soma FM's special Doom Station to hear a haunting seance of soundscapes made for tortured souls, the living dead, and cursed spirits of the night. Search Doom Special on TuneIn to run a chill down your spine this Halloween.
The swagger of a perfect dunk, the rush of a three made from all the way downtown, the adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing right corner three, another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Looking for a new podcast to inspire your work life? On the latest edition of Pod Club, Adam Grant, host of TED Podcast Work Life, shares the pods that have blown his mind.
My all-time favorite episode of the podcast is How to Love Criticism. I went to Bridgewater, where a manager was told in front of 200 colleagues that he was the single worst manager at the company. And I came away convinced that we all have a support network, but we also need a challenge network.
Go to podcast on TuneIn to see Adam's Pod Club picks. Well, we have the treats. This October, there's no better place to listen to your favorite audio than on TuneIn. From the NFL, the World Series, and the start of the NHL and NBA seasons. Want to get into the Halloween mood? We have tons of spooky podcasts and music for any costume party. Sports, news, podcast, music, and more. Soundtrack your Halloween with TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Risk-off day for investors as they seek out haven assets, sending stocks lower. The S&P 500 down 13 points right now at 3,033. The Dow Jones Industrial Average 168 points lower at 27,018. Now the NASDAQ Composite Index is 14 points lower at 8289. Weak manufacturing data, renewed concern on trade, rattling the markets today, adjusting to the Federal Reserve signal that it is done easing interest rates. We have treasuries, gold, and the yen all higher as a result. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, John.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We did get a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. They voted to open the public phase of President Trump's impeachment inquiry. It's unclear what exactly this will mean for markets, considering the fact that the Senate is widely thought to probably be poised to shoot this down. Greg Valliere joins us now, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. Greg, what's the biggest takeaway from today's vote?
Well, I'd say, Lisa, good morning. I'd say that for Republicans, be careful what you wish for. I mean, they've been demanding more transparency, and now they're going to get it. Well, will there be more transparency, for example, with John Bolton testifying? So it's a mixed blessing for the Republicans. It could actually backfire on them.
Greg, what do you think next steps are in timing?
Well, I think, Paul, that they want to get this done, obviously, before Christmas. So I think we're going to speed up the hearings. They're already having hearings on Saturdays. I think they would like to get all of the evidence in and be ready to vote on a formal impeachment between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Greg Valliere, thank you for joining us on such short notice. Give us your thoughts here on this impeachment process, which is rolling along. Greg is Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments, giving us his thoughts as the House votes today to open a public phase of the Trump impeachment inquiry. Let's bring in Mark Stokel. He's CEO and Portfolio Manager of Adams Funds. Mark, thanks so much for joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. You know, today's impeachment is just another piece of quote-unquote noise that investors have to deal with. It's trade, it's Brexit. How do you suggest investors should kind of factor in or factor out the noise in their investment process?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's something that we are pretty passionate about, because one of the concerns that we have is most of the time when there are uneasy things happening, investors get nervous, they get scared, and their first reaction, because it's easy, is to trade, and they'll trade out of their positions. And there's a statistic that is actually troublesome, and most individual investors that invest in the SPY, just the regular S&P 500 ETF, do not get the S&P 500 ETF return, because they trade. And I think it's trying to be, number one, intellectually honest about how much risk you should be taking given where you are in your life and what you're saving for. Number two, decide what asset classes you want to be invested in and leave it alone. There's a lot of noise, and a lot of this noise tends not to really matter at the end of the day. It will matter today, might tomorrow, might for a week. But the idea that it scares you into trading is exactly the wrong thing. Yeah. Over time, bull markets last twice as long as bear markets. The markets go up over time. And if you're intellectually honest about how much risk you want to take and you invest, leave it alone. Doesn't mean you can't adjust if something changes in your life, but you really do need to stay invested in order to really get the power of compounding that long-term investing offers.
So why have active managers? Why not just as a person creating a retirement fund, just put their money in SPY and leave it there until they're older and they rejigger it and make it safer?
They could. The problem is you take away any opportunity to outperform that. And I think that one of the things is an active manager, if you're not choosing active manager. Is that what you meant?
But yes, exactly. But then the question is, as an active manager, how do you know when to trade given the noise? What's the sort of threshold to change your view?
I see what you're saying. You need to try to tune out the noise and concentrate as best you can on data. If you concentrate on data, that will lead you to that will lead you to decisions that we think are better decisions, as opposed to, I can't believe that XYZ happened. Maybe we should get more defensive. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the right answer. And defensive stocks might be in vogue, might not be. But I think it's the concept of trying to tune it out and have a longer term perspective. And again, as I said earlier, part of the problem here is it's easy to trade. All of these companies have made it incredibly easy to trade, and which is fine, and it's cheaper, which is great. But most people should be in it for a longer term and just try their best to tune out the noise. And again, as I said, if you're trading, you are not getting the benefit of compounding, which over the time is an incredibly powerful concept.
What in the Adams funds, how are you positioned right now? We're 10 plus years into this economic cycle. That's getting people to think about, do I need to be reallocating my assets here for what the next 5 years is likely to be probably lower growth than the last 5? How are you positioned?
We are positioned looking for stocks that we believe can outperform the S&P 500. So in some respects, we're a little different because our bogey is to try to outperform the S&P 500. We've been fortunate; we've been able to do that very well. But so that's different than somebody who's looking for an absolute return. I mean, the way that we manage the fund is we're sector neutral, which means we have the same weightings in healthcare and technology and all the sectors as the S&P 500. We add our value by selecting the right stocks within each of those sectors. There's been a lot of debate about growth versus value. We tend to be core managers, and I think that one of the challenges with growth versus value is everybody today, I believe, is guessing that it's time to go into value. There really isn't much in the way of empirical data to convince us that the growth win over value is going to change any time. So again, I go back to data. I would prefer to see, rather than say, I think right now is the right time. You could have said that a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. You could have said that. So we would prefer to see value stocks begin to have an inflection point versus growth. And that, to us, would lead us to believe that now is maybe a better time to begin to look at value. Take Facebook and Apple that reported yesterday. So they reported really good quarters. So your value alternative is IBM, Cisco, Oracle. So I don't believe that this is the time to just put a stake in the ground and say it's a really good time to go to value. We would prefer to see data tell us that in fact they are producing better revenues, better earnings, and they're sustainable.
So, Mark, what's your highest conviction stock pick right now?
Microsoft. It's our biggest overweight in the fund is Microsoft.
All right. And what's your thesis?
The Microsoft thesis does revolve a lot around the cloud. They do a lot of really good things, but the cloud to us has a lot more runway to go than I think a lot of people expect. We think there's at least 5-year runway in the cloud. They've proven they are a really good competitor to Amazon's AWS. Azure has proven that. The other thing that I think is really important is in the cloud, we've seen higher revenue in the cloud companies. A lot of that is not prices going up, but companies buying cloud equipment and buying cloud equipment for leverage and hoping to be able to, and realizing they can get a lot more leverage. They're buying more equipment as opposed to prices are going up significantly. So I think that's a good guidepost to there's a lot of momentum here, and they're really good at it.
Mark Stoeckle, thank you so much for being with us, Chief Executive Officer and Portfolio Manager for Adams Funds. Just to repeat the news of the hour, the U.S. House has set President Trump on a path toward becoming only the third president in history to be impeached. They passed a resolution. It kicks off the public phase of their accelerating inquiry. There is going to be much more on that coming up in Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with my co-host and colleague Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg Markets.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
It's another Thursday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and explore tropical rainforests. Fly from London Gatwick to Costa Rica with British Airways from £218 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Hello? This is Dustin. I found something. Is anybody there?
We hear you, Dustin. With Sky Q, you can easily catch up on epic Netflix shows like Stranger Things and then watch award-winning Sky originals like Chernobyl. Get Sky and Netflix all in one place on Sky Q for one surprisingly low price. Just £25 a month. Visit sky.com and join today. Offer ends November 14th. 18-month minimum terms. Prices may change during contract. Requires Sky Q box connected to broadband. Set up from £20. Further terms apply.
Watford, it's chilly outside, and you're staying in with your feet up, and they can stay up. Because with Hive Active Heating, you can set the perfect temperature without even lifting a finger.
Alexa, ask Hive to boost my heating.
And by never having to heat an empty home, you could save up to £120 a year on your heating bill.
Alexa, play my Nice and Toasty playlist.
Search Hive Heating to buy now. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply.
Hey NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you have unlimited access to every team and every game in the league. Listen live as it happens or on demand. Anytime, anywhere. All season long. Search NFL today.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg World Headquarters headquarters in New York, to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. On the brief today, Sean Donnan from Washington on reports that China may have given up on the overall trade deal with the United States. Kevin Sturley from Capitol Hill on the formal House vote to proceed with the impeachment inquiry. And Wendy Benjaminson on the state of the 2020 campaign and how impeachment proceedings could complicate things. So let's start with you first, Sean. Remarkable report you have out that actually China has said, okay, we'll do this phase one deal, but we don't even have hopes of doing an overall long-term deal with the United States.
Yeah, this is based on some reporting that we've been doing for a few weeks now, talking to both Chinese officials and people who have been meeting with Chinese officials in Beijing and other places. And the common thread that we get out of all of those conversations is that the Chinese are looking very skeptically at the possibility of anything beyond that phase one agreement, saying simply they're not going to move off of their red lines on substance, and they don't think Donald Trump's going to move on tariffs and lift all of the tariffs, which is a Chinese demand. So as we set up in the next couple of weeks for that phase one deal, and President Trump today tweeting out that the U.S. and China were working on finding a new location for a signing ceremony now that the APEC summit has been canceled because of unrest in Chile, we need to think also beyond that. And already we're seeing some criticism of the content of that phase one deal, we should say.
Okay, Sean, let's assume for the moment it plays out the way your reporting would indicate it might, which is they get the phase one done. It's sort of a truce. We don't increase tariffs, presumably. We don't cut them back either. What does the United States get out of that, and what does the United States not get out of that?
Well, essentially, on the agricultural side, it gets a return to purchases by China at levels that were there before the whole trade war started, before these tariffs went into place. We are expecting some intellectual property concessions by the Chinese, although a lot of experts are looking at what might come out of that and saying that looks a lot like what China is doing already. There may be some other purchases promised by China, but again, those look like they are returned to pre-trade war levels. And that's the reason why a lot of trade experts are looking at this package and saying, have the trade wars been worth it? Has the economic damage that we've seen from this been worth it? And that's a question that Donald Trump's going to have to answer, not just in the coming weeks, but next year as he runs for re-election.
Yeah, potentially on the campaign trail. Exactly, Sean. Thank you so much to Sean Donnan for reporting from Washington. Now let's go up to Capitol Hill and Kevin Sturley, because there was an historic vote up there just a short time ago, Kevin, and they are going forward, but boy, it looked partisan to me.
It did, with the exception of two Democrats, Colin Peterson as well as Jeff Van Drew. Two Democrats actually voted with Republicans. Democrats, though, taking the first step to initiate and formalize this impeachment inquiry along a vote of 232 to 196. What they voted on is to now have this be much more public. The opportunity to have these hearings that have been going on behind closed doors to be more public in the days and weeks ahead. They also really have formalized this entire process. What we don't know is when articles of impeachment will likely be brought to the House floor for members to then take the formal vote on that. Now, that could happen by the end of the year. It could also happen sometime in January, and that would pose significant political risk to several of the Democratic 2020 presidential candidates.
Well, precisely, but it's important how the process works, and I want to make sure we get it straight, because as I understand it, this does not mean everything opens up today. Adam Schiff with the Intelligence Committee gets to keep having behind closed doors. I think that the part that's open really is going to be judiciary, and it's up to judiciary to vote whether, in fact, there will be articles of impeachment. That may take a while.
Precisely. And what I'm told by some staffers just within the last hour who I've been communicating with is that likely will start to begin by the end of the year. But whether or not we get those articles of impeachment, that remains a separate issue. But you're absolutely right. These private closed-door hearings are still going to continue. John Bolton, the president's former national security advisor, has been asked to testify. It's unknown whether or not he will comply with that next week. But these hearings are still very much going on behind closed doors.
Okay, thank you so much to Kevin Sturley up at Capitol Hill. Now let's go to Wendy Benjaminson, who covers all politics for us. Wendy, I want to pick up on the point that Kevin made. If this, in fact, does drag into next year, what does that mean for the Democratic candidates, particularly those who are in the Senate now, as they're at the same time having to compete for primaries?
Well, it means a big headache for them, in truth. I mean, the thing that if I were any one of those candidates or their staffs would be praying for is that this gets wrapped up quickly one way or another, so they know what they're facing. I mean, the first question they have to wonder about is, will they be running against Donald Trump? It's likely they will. I don't think the Senate will convict him, but, there is that chance out there that they might be running against Mike Pence, or who knows. Then there's the question of this just going on, and the Democrats, perhaps the Democratic brand being a little tarnished by a long, painful impeachment process. And there's Joe Biden. And the more right or wrong, but the more times voters hear Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Ukraine, it's not helpful to his campaign.
At the same time, there appears to be perhaps a movement towards some further winnowing, because there are reports that Kamala Harris, the senator from California, may be cutting back some on her campaign staff.
That's right. She put out a memo yesterday and had a call with staffers that, as she said before, that she's going to put all her eggs in the Iowa basket. But this time they're cutting staff at the Baltimore headquarters. They're cutting staff at in her home state of California, in New Hampshire, and they are hoping that that will give them enough money to do a 7-figure ad buy in Iowa. And she's really hoping to have a strong showing in Iowa. But she had that little blip after, I think, the second debate in Detroit when she attacked Joe Biden. And after that, she's polling way down there at the bottom of the pack. So this is a good Hail Mary pass, but we'll see if it works.
Okay, we will indeed. Thank you so much to Wendy Benjaminson for her reporting from Washington. And now let's get a check on how the markets are reacting to today's top stories. Joining us now is Kaylee Line. So I'm just looking here at the equity markets. It doesn't look like they're reacting a whole lot to impeachment.
Not so much to impeachment, but there's been a slew of other disappointments and or negative things from the market's perspective that have come out over the morning. First of all, yesterday you had a Fed that signaled maybe it's on hold for now. That's not great for risk sentiment. Then you had this Bloomberg report, the prospect of their China doubting the prospects of a long-term trade deal. And then you had some really, really weak economic data with the Chicago PMI coming in at 43.2. I mean, that's a level that's rarely seen outside of recession. So that's really adding to a defensive tone. You're seeing equities heading back down now toward the lows of the session. Tech is getting the least hit because of some positive earnings from heavyweights, but nonetheless, it's really risk off. You're seeing money flood into some of those safer haven assets like treasuries. The 10-year yield now 1.7%. That's down 7 basis points.
Well, I was going to say, it feels a bit more macro for the Fed and things like that rather than micro, because if you look at Facebook, a number of these earnings going out have been very strong.
Well, and that, to that point, I think that's why you're not seeing steeper losses than you are today, because you look at Facebook and Apple, those are the two of the biggest companies out there. I mean, Apple has nearly 5% weighting in the S&P 500, and that stock is up by about 2%, as is Facebook. You also have some big outsized movers on earnings, the likes of Kraft Heinz today. So you have some of those more positives on the micro scale, but as you said, that macro picture is really making investors nervous today.
Great. Thank you so much to Katie Alliance for that market report. And now we're going to turn to Ritika Gupta for Bloomberg First Word News.
Thanks, David. As we've been reporting, the House of Representatives has passed a resolution that kicks off the public phase of their presidential impeachment inquiry. The vote played out along mostly partisan lines. It will begin open hearings to investigate what Democrats say is an abuse of power by President Trump. Some lawmakers believe he pressured the Ukrainian government to undertake an investigation for his own personal political benefit. China and the US are getting close to signing the first phase of a trade deal, but Bloomberg has learned that Chinese officials doubt a long-term agreement is possible with President Trump. They remain concerned about his impulsive nature, and they've told visitors to Beijing that they will not budge on the toughest issues. And a couple of notes on caution on the U.S. economy. Consumer spending trailed forecasts last month. It rose 0.2%. Meanwhile, weekly applications for unemployment benefits rose more than expected. Jobless claims were up 5,000 to 218,000. We'll get more on the labour market tomorrow. That's when the October jobs report comes out. And the Trump administration is looking to punish Spain as a way to get at Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro. Bloomberg's learned that some administration officials are pushing for sanctions against Spain. They say the Spanish are financially supporting Maduro, but other U.S. officials worry that imposing sanctions would just alienate an ally. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thank you so much, Ritika. Coming up, the House took on a historic vote to open the public phase of the impeachment process into President Trump. How does that move play in the battleground states? We're going to ask Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio. That's next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
We just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. We dropped off our Christmas shopping at the hotel. Then it was off to be spellbound at the Theatre Royal Bath. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
It's another Thursday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and witness luscious scenery and calming waves. Fly from London Gatwick to St. Lucia with British Airways, with flights and 7 nights hotel from just £739 per person. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Hearing is an underrated miracle. Intimate whispers, the lushness of symphonies, the soothing patter of rain on leaves. If you had that taken away from you, it would be a massive loss for most of us. Almost all of us go every day without really stopping to think about just how important it is to us.
Audible presents The Body, a guide for occupants, written and read by Bill Bryson, including original bonus material exclusively available at Audible. Listen free as part of your 30-day trial, $7.99 a month after 30 days, renews automatically.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want horrors, no problem. It's not real, it's not real, it's not real. Documentaries, I got ones about space, sharks, or superstars. Or how about football? I've got the Premier League. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus, month passes auto renew, terms apply.
Hey NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can hear every NFL game live as it's happening, or catch it later on demand. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
For some, Halloween is a little more serious than candy and costumes. To give your Hallows Eve a truly frightening feeling, turn on Soma FM's special Doom Station to hear a haunting seance of soundscapes made for tortured souls, the living dead, and cursed spirits of the night. Search Doom Special on TuneIn to run a chill down your spine this Halloween.
Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
What if you could keep up with cable news even when you're on the go? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to MSNBC live without any commercial interruptions. All of the news, none of the ads. Listen live on TuneIn Premium today.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. But he stays on his feet.
It is the annual Florida-Georgia College Football Showdown. This year, there are more than just bragging rights on the line. With both teams ranked in the top 10, will it be the Gators or Bulldogs leaving Jacksonville on top of the SEC East and in the driver's seat for the conference championship? Find out this Saturday with kickoff starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Search college football to listen.
ESPN Radio and TuneIn just go hand in hand. Hi, this is Mel Kiper Jr. reminding you that all of your favorite ESPN Radio shows and events are right here on TuneIn. Just search ESPN Radio to begin enjoying it today.
Looking for a new podcast to inspire your work life? On the latest edition of Pod Club, Adam Grant,
host of TED Podcast Work Life, shares the pods that have blown his mind.
What episode surprised me most and why? I think that was probably The Office Without A-Holes. I went in thinking that getting rid of bullies and selfish takers and jerks would be an almost impossible task. I was convinced that difficult conversations with the worst people in your work life don't always have to be difficult.
Go to Podcast on TuneIn to see Adam's Pod Club picks.
If you wanted to get a better deal from somebody else, you had to actually tell everybody that you knew, oh, I have a new phone number. And it was a huge barrier to change, and therefore it was a huge barrier to competition. Well, one simple rule change saying that number belongs to you now, and it's portable between platforms, between carriers, opened up competition and created better service in more places.
You said that there's need to articulate the problems really more clearly. What are they from your perspective? Because many might say the consumer doesn't have enough variation to go to. Facebook is so large, Google is so large, but then there is LinkedIn, there is TikTok, there are rival social media platforms out there.
Well, one of the interesting things is who's the consumer. Traditional antitrust looks at the price of the product, the availability of the product, are there shortages, the quality of the goods and services that are offered. So how much did you pay for Facebook? How much did you pay for your Google search engine? Is it more or less available? Is it better or worse? Those kinds of inquiries don't really get at the aggregation of power and the market dominance. I would suggest that in this space, you're not the consumer, you're the product.
That was Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost speaking earlier with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. Still ahead, the ultimate subtweet. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey takes a jab at Mark Zuckerberg's stance on political ads, but Facebook reported strong earnings right in the middle of that controversy. That's our stock of the hour, and that's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
You don't usually find the titans of finance, business, and politics sitting around together.
There's been this transfer of royal power and royal prerogative.
But amazingly, they're nearly all here every weekday.
Let's talk about their data. What are you looking for?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
So where does the circuit breaker come from?
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
He's got to respond, doesn't he?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Facebook shares are higher after reporting stronger than, and they beat estimates on their earnings with stronger user growth. But the clouds hanging over Facebook include regulatory issues and the company's decision not to block political ads. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde asked COO Sheryl Sandberg to explain Facebook's decision in an exclusive interview.
We're not doing it because of the money. This is less than 1% of our revenue, and the revenue is not worth the controversy. But what Mark said is that we believe in free expression. We believe in political speech, and ads can be an important part of that. Where we're really focused, and I think we are leading, is on transparency. We put out an ad library. We now announced a presidential ads tracker, which means that you can see any ad anyone is running who's a political candidate anywhere in the U.S., anywhere in the world even, if it's not targeted at you. And that kind of transparency we think is really important to people understanding. You also talked about investing in protection. One of the things we talked about on our earnings call just now is the size of the investments we're making, prepared for 2020, working with election commissions all over the world, hiring engineers, using machine, using human reviewers, really doing what we can to make sure people are kept safe.
So when Twitter decides to go the opposite direction, does that make you question your own decision, or you still stand by the fundamental reasoning and transparency that you can bring?
Well, Mark has said on the call that, we've thought about this for years, and certainly we've been thinking about it now. And we fundamentally believe that political ads are an important part of the dialogue and can be important against incumbents, can be important for new views. But we also believe that free expression across the board is something that we stand for as a company. And people all over the world are using that. Certainly politicians are using that, but people are using it. And that's how you see our growth continuing.
Let's talk more a little bit about politicians, because it's going to be a tough year in terms of regulatory scrutiny. Do you worry about talk of the business model being under attack? How do you see your role in educating, particularly those on Capitol Hill, about this?
Well, I think we really have to help people understand that targeted ads and privacy are not at odds. We can do both. So if you're an advertiser, you're the biggest company in the world or the smallest company, and we have 7 million advertisers, 140 million businesses using our services. And you want to show an ad to, women in their 50s, that's me, who live in California. We take the ad, we show it to that person, we give you back aggregated results. We can do very good ads targeting that really makes ads good for people and really helps advertisers reach the right person without violating privacy. And that's something I think we need to do a much better job of explaining.
And indeed, the integration that you're doing at the moment, you talk about the focus on the family of apps, whether it be, of course, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. You're also looking to put them together in the back end, encrypt them. Do you think this is going to help in terms of ensuring that you do remain one whole business?
Well, that's not where this is coming from. We were doing that before. What we really want to do is use common infrastructure so that we can help build our services, but also make sure the services provide their own unique experiences. Mark talked about this on the call as, one of the things that happened as Instagram was growing is that Instagram's growth is explained by, Kevin and Mike's really amazing product leadership, but also by what Facebook brought in terms of infrastructure, in terms of ads. And we want to continue to do that, support the apps we have in our family, make sure they have what they need to do to continue to serve people around the world.
And support them through commerce as well. Businesses, I know, are hugely important to you. It's not just about the individual, the connecting with your family, it's connecting with business. How are you seeing commerce eventually playing, particularly on the Instagram front?
So I think people are excited about commerce, excited about IG shopping, which is still very early and nascent. What we are is a great platform for people to find things. People discover products they want, services they want. We have done less going all the way down the funnel to where people actually buy and purchase. And those are more nascent products for us, but we're working on them. And we continue to see our role to help people connect. Businesses are using it not just to sell, but increasingly to message. One of the coolest things that's happening on the platform is how many businesses are connecting to people directly on Messenger and WhatsApp. It's pretty cool for a person to have the opportunity to message a business directly and a business to have the opportunity to do that with people.
Is the Libra project important to the commerce part of the business? Are you still fully committed to that project as it stands?
Well, we're definitely committed to it. And as Mark said when he testified, we're not going to roll this out until we have regulatory approval. Most of the commerce efforts have really nothing to do with Libra. That's a separate thing and it's a separate association. Our commerce efforts are things on our own services to help you go all the way from seeing a product you might like to checking out to buying it on our service.
That was Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg speaking to Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in an exclusive interview. It's time now for the stock of the hour, and why not? Let's make it Facebook. It is trading at the highest level since July, even as the company faces increasing scrutiny from Washington. Kaylee Lines is here with more. So, first of all, on this politically, it's just a blip on the radar, given what they did with their earnings yesterday.
Well, the underlying fundamentals of the company are really just looking so strong. They're still adding a lot of users. They added 35 million globally monthly users in the quarter. 3 million of those were in the U.S., which is actually a pretty good sign because there was a lot of concern that this market, the domestic market, may be getting saturated. And revenue also grew 29% to a record now at $17.6 billion. And what's so interesting is this shows that the company is still getting traction, not just with users, but with advertisers, even despite the fact that they're facing this onslaught of scrutiny from Capitol Hill and elsewhere, whether it's from antitrust to privacy concerns to their political ads that you heard Sheryl Sandberg talking about just there. They're not only running them, they're also refusing to fact check them. And that's caused a lot of controversy, but it's not showing up in the bottom or top line.
But clearly the users are not bothered by this. They're using it, and so they're making money off of it. It must be that the market is discounting deeply the possibility of regulation, because if there were regulation affecting that advertising business, it would go straight at those earnings. If, in fact, they couldn't use all of our data to sell those advertising, it would affect that top line.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. The market probably is putting that aside partially for now. And it's important to note that at least on the political advertising front, it's not that much of a revenue driver for them. So if that's the concern, at the end of the day, it's not going to have that much of a financial impact. So there could be some of that at play. That's not to say that should we see an Elizabeth Warren presidency, for example, as we get further into this 2020 election cycle, that it won't become more of a concern as that prospect maybe comes a little bit more to the forefront.
As we said, Twitter's going a very different direction. Jack Dorsey's going a very different direction. Is that material to Twitter? Do they have a lot more political advertising?
So it's not really. I mean, in the 2018 midterm cycle, they got $3 million in ads from political advertising. So financially, not a big deal, but it's, I think, the optics at this point. Twitter is kind of taking the moral high ground on this issue. And while Jack Dorsey in his tweet announcing this ban didn't necessarily point to Mark Zuckerberg directly, he kind of alluded to him, his theory that this is all about free speech. Dorsey basically says that's not valid. And not only is Twitter banning these ads, they're saying they're not going to promote any material that take really strong policy positions. So they're taking very, very different views on this. And you actually are seeing Twitter shares kind of get a little bit lower on the news today. Again, though, it's not a huge financial impact for either.
I'm not sure politicians will feel if they can't get any advertising at all. That's not very good. They're going to like that.
Well,
right?
It's a lot of eyeballs that
That's
are
right.
at stake here.
Exactly. Okay. Many thanks to Bloomberg's Kaylee Alliance on Facebook. Up next, he went from a Top Gun fighter pilot to top speechwriter for Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. Which was more dangerous? We talk next with retired Navy Commander Guy Snodgrass. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. stocks are falling on trade concerns. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 201 points to 26,985. S&P 500 down 0.5%. The Nasdaq dropping 0.3%. Economic growth could be wobbling. Consumer spending trailed forecasts in September, which offers a note of caution after the Federal Reserve signaled that it's refraining from future interest rate cuts. Meanwhile, jobless claims edged higher last week, rising to 218,000. The government issues its monthly jobs report on Friday. Economists anticipate a slowdown, partly reflecting the impact of the GM strike. And it's Halloween, and the National Retail Federation projects spending on candy, costumes, decorations, and activities will total $8.8 billion. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Even hardcore do-it-yourself types appreciate having us curate our best moments for you in one show every day.
The company will expand its catalog more frequently over several months.
Otherwise, it's just too hard.
The DNC will officially announce who made the cut.
Bloomberg Best with June Grosso and Ed Baxter.
They discuss sanctions against Iran.
Weekday evenings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Ritika Gupta.
Thanks, David. Police and protesters engaged in a standoff in Hong Kong's nightlife district. Pro-democracy demonstrators urged people to celebrate Halloween by wearing masks in defiance of a government ban on face coverings. Riot police pushed people back slowly from the area and fired tear gas. It wasn't immediately clear whether there had been violence between protesters and officers or if anyone had been arrested. In Southern California, more than a dozen brush fires have broken out. The biggest is near the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. The fires are being driven by 60-mile-an-hour winds. In Northern California, firefighters are gaining the upper hand on a fire in wine country. It's burned down more than 76,000 acres and destroyed dozens of homes. TransCanada Energy's Keystone Pipeline leaked an estimated 383,000 gallons of oil in northeastern North Dakota. State regulators discovered the leak earlier this week, and the pipeline has been shut down since. It can handle about 23 million gallons a day. Authorities said some wetlands were affected, but not any sources of drinking water. And President Trump is resuming his social media attacks on the Federal Reserve. This after reports that China is casting doubts about reaching a trade agreement with the administration. Even after the central bank cut interest rates for a third time this year, the president tweeted that people are, quote, very disappointed. He says the Fed has been either too fast or too slow with its cuts, and that other central banks are, quote, running circles around them. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Ritika. Guy Snodgrass was on his way toward flag rank in the U.S. Navy, a graduate of the Naval Academy, naval aviator who taught Top Guns, and on a path to commanding an air wing, when General Mattis reached out to make him his top speechwriter at the Pentagon. He's written about that experience in his new book, Holding the Line, Inside Trump's Pentagon with Secretary Mattis. And we welcome Commander Snodgrass now to Bloomberg, joining us today from Washington. So, Commander, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, good morning, David. Thanks for having me.
It's a fascinating tale, in some ways a sobering tale, and I want to pick up one thing that really is arguably in the news today. As you know, the House has just voted to proceed with an impeachment inquiry, and that arises out of the exchange between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. I'm not suggesting you know anything about that, but it did sort of suggest that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has sort of a transactional approach to a lot of his dealings around the world. And in your book, I think it's fair to say that comes across in a lot of the exchanges between General Mattis and President Trump when you talk about defense policy, and you'd quickly get to things like, are they paying their dues in NATO? Is South Korea paying enough for our troops and things? Is that something you observed?
It is, and as you mentioned, you can read about that in the book. I mean, there's 2 chapters dedicated to meetings where we hosted President Trump and the Pentagon, where we wanted in the first meeting to share with him the experience of and the importance of having military members stationed around the globe. The return on invested capital is how we phrased it, for the small investment America makes and then what we get in return from our allies and partners. The second time he comes, we walked him through the Joint Strike Fighter program, the importance of America's nuclear forces, and of course our upcoming national national defense strategy. So there's a lot in there that will bring the readers in behind the scenes to let them know how we made these decisions on issues of national and international importance.
Obviously, the President of the United States is responsible for the budget and for making sure that we are fiscally responsible. Is this president different from others in your experience or impression or reading in the extent to which he does bring transactions in? Because it's not irrational to think about the transaction.
Well, I don't focus as much on what you just mentioned with the transactional nature. What I do focus on is, in this case, the restoration of America's military power. As you know, when President Trump was brought into office, and of course when I worked with Secretary Mattis, we had a defense budget that needed to be increased so we could actually now begin to compete once again on the global stage. We'd focused for 17 years at that point on the global war on terror, and we realized that you have other nations around the world that want to compete with the United States, and we needed to make sure our military was positioned ready to do so. We increased the defense budget to $700 billion the first year, $716 billion the second year, and the book will bring you into how we made some of those decisions and how we focus on some of the upcoming major defense programs.
Yeah, and as you say in the book, one of the major accomplishments was getting that budget through, which is terribly important, and General Mattis and your team worked awfully hard to get that done. Let's talk about one transaction specifically that's gotten a lot of attention, is this so-called JEDI contract for cloud computing that's gone to Microsoft now. And you write in the book that Trump had called and directed Mattis to, quote, screw Amazon by locking them out, and that Mattis said, we are not going to do that. At the same time, you go on at the same page, this is page 309, to say Mattis worked to align the military's action to legally pursue the outcomes he knew Trump wanted to achieve. Does that suggest that legally, complying with all the laws and regulations, that actually General Mattis did carry out President Trump's direction to make sure Amazon didn't get that contract?
Well, as you know, that contract wasn't awarded until last Friday, so that was close to a year after Mattis's departure. But when you think about that type of situation where you've got a president who wants to make sure that his actions are being followed out, and I think that's the role that someone like Secretary Mattis, Secretary of State Tillerson, and others in the current administration have played and done a nice job with, which is making sure that they meet the president's intent to the max extent possible, but they want to make sure that they serve as those legal and ethical guardrails while doing so. And of course, you can see that there are numerous passages in the book that talk about those kinds of experiences that we had behind closed doors.
Let's talk about that role that General Mattis played while he was there. There's one chapter here. It's chapter actually 15 called Last Adult Standing. You talk about Secretary Mattis's relationship with Rex Tillerson at Department of State, also with General Kelly. And as these people slowly get winnowed down, he was sort of the last adult standing. Is there an adult left standing now? Did somebody replace General Mattis or, for that matter, Rex Tillerson?
You know, I'd have to actually be still in the administration or still at the Pentagon to give you a fair answer on that. What I can say, though, is that it was it just stood out. Back in April of 2018, I'll never forget being in Mattis's front office and watching the TV as we learned that, in rapid succession, you had Tillerson depart the administration almost on a no-notice basis. He just announced by the end of the day, I'm leaving. And then you had H.R. McMaster in that same type of position. So within about a month, you had a lot of these individuals who were supporting Secretary Mattis and working with him, with our alliances and partners overseas to make sure that America's values and needs were being reflected. They left, and that put Mattis in the crosshairs.
We're talking with retired Naval Commander Guy Snodgrass. He has written a book about his experience as a top speechwriter for General Mattis when he was Secretary of Defense. Finally, Commander, one of the themes in your book is that General Mattis, as a general, always fought with other people, with allies. Those relationships were critically important. Whether it was NATO, whether it was over in Iraq, it was critically important to him. At the same time, President Trump doesn't seem to be as enamored of allies and working with allies. Have we done permanent damage in our alliances around the world?
Alliances change on a daily, yearly, monthly basis, so it's hard to say that there's been permanent damage done, but I would say that it is an urgent issue when you think about the 7 decades that we've spent building these alliances with NATO, with nations in the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, and Europe, and suddenly to put them at increased risk. Now, it's understandable. We want our allies and partners to pay their fair share, as this administration has said, and I do believe in that. But at the same time, you have to realize that we can't demand that our allies do anything. We need to work cooperatively with them. And this is what this book will show you. It'll bring you in behind the scenes as we work furiously to preserve those relationships overseas.
Okay, many thanks to Commander Guy Snodgrass, Speaker and Communications Director for Secretary of Defense General Mattis, and he's the author of Holding the Line, a new book about his experience in the Department of Defense. Coming up here, the plight of the Kurds in northeast Syria became a matter of international concern when the Turkish army crossed the border. We talk with the former UN Human Rights Chief, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
It's another Thursday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and relax with 365 beautiful beaches.
So yes, sir, what would you like to have?
Fly from London Gatwick to Antigua with British Airways from £223 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Hello? This is Dustin. I found something. Is anybody there?
We hear you, Dustin. With Sky Q, you can easily catch up on epic Netflix shows like Stranger Things and then watch award-winning Sky originals like Chernobyl. Get Sky and Netflix all in one place on Sky Q for one surprisingly low price, just £25 a month. Visit sky.com and join today. Offer ends November 14th. 18-month minimum terms. Prices may change during contract. Requires Sky Q box connected to broadband. Set up from £20. Further terms apply.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to discover what's happening in the app and around the world. Be the first to know about upcoming games and the hottest new music. Follow @TuneIn and always be in the know.
Stuck in traffic during the big game? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to your favorite NFL team on the go. No TV required. Even during rush hour, you won't miss a single touchdown. Listen to the NFL on TuneIn Premium today.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Looking for a new podcast to inspire your work life? On the latest edition of Pod Club, Adam Grant, host of TED Podcast Work Life, shares the pods that have blown his mind.
For Work Life, the top 3 episodes I think everyone should listen to. Gosh, that's like choosing a favorite child. I guess I'd pick How to Love Criticism, Your Hidden Personality, and The Creative Power of Misfits. And if there were a 4th, How to Trust People You Don't Like, and a 5th would be the debate I had with Malcolm Gladwell.
Go to Podcast on TuneIn to see Adam's Pod Club picks.
ESPN Radio and TuneIn just go hand in hand. Hi, this is Mel Kiper Jr. reminding you that all of your favorite ESPN Radio shows and events are right here on TuneIn. Just search ESPN Radio to begin enjoying it today.
For some, Halloween is a little more serious than candy and costumes. To give your Hallows Eve a truly frightening feeling, turn on Soma FM's special Doom Station to hear a haunting seance of soundscapes made for tortured souls, the living dead, and cursed spirits of the night. Search Doom Special on TuneIn to run a chill down your spine this Halloween.
far wing. Elevates. Triple bucket.
The roar of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut it.
To the sideline, the man fleet for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Pump fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right block.
NBA Today to start listening.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stands on his feet.
It is the annual Florida-Georgia College Football Showdown. This year, there are more than just bragging rights on the line. With both teams ranked in the top 10, will it be the Gators or Bulldogs leaving Jacksonville on top of the SEC East and in the driver's seat for the conference championship? Find out this Saturday with kickoff starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Search college football to listen.
Successive changes of government, and that provides also for Arabs yearning for something better an example of what could also materialize. It's not all going to always be Yemen, Libya, or Syria. There are examples of things that can improve in the Middle East, and I think that's what we probably see happening in the Lebanese streets. In every sense, when people take to the streets, they are interviewing their leaders. They're saying to them, have you done your job as leader in offering us the right sort of services and protections that we need as citizens? And clearly, if they're marching by using their feet and waving their fists, they're not very happy, and they're more or less expressing their anger in a way that's very clear.
As you talk about people talking in the streets, I mean, we may think about some spots in the Middle East. It's not just the Middle East.
No.
We're seeing it in Chile.
That's right.
We had to stop the APEC. You certainly know we've been going on for some time in Hong Kong.
That's right.
Is there some commonality to this, or are they all idiosyncratic to each country?
No, I think there is. I think what they're basically expressing is not anti-government sentiment. It's anti-governance sentiment in the way that governments has been conducted poorly by public officials who need to perform better. And here, the investment community also needs to view the world not simply as markets and a sort of demand-driven orientation, but people do suffer in many parts of the world. They're not happy with the way that their governance structures are working, and they demand more. So the scent of revolution is basically wafting in many parts of the world, and this adds to the complexities that we see in place at the moment. We need really good leadership, smart leadership, selfless leadership. We don't want basically selfish, narrow-minded leadership, which is occasionally what we get.
In your estimation, is that a political issue, or is it to some extent an economic issue as well? That's to say, if things are growing, if people think they're doing better, they can do better for their children, maybe they're not as likely to take the streets. But if they feel that they're not growing, they don't have a rosier future, then they're less satisfied.
No, you're absolutely right, David. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I think people need to feel that their lives are safer, but they need to also experience these basic fundamental freedoms: the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of association and assembly. I mean, the very basic freedoms that give our lives some form of dignity, and not to be treated as just units of production, and that's all.
So as you look around the world, and bearing in mind your former hat when you were running UN Human Rights Commission, is there leadership, global leadership on this subject? I mean, President Trump does not seem to be interested in that subject. Angela Merkel is in the later days of her regime. You wouldn't look to President Xi. Is there anyone you look around and say, yes, that's a leader on this subject?
Well, I think I would argue the problem has been for many years now that we've all, as countries, basically put our national interests at the forefront, and the global interest has always been somewhere in the back, and we're suffering from it. If we don't think of the global interests as being something that will then affect our national interests in a positive way, we know what happens. I mean, we've had 2 world wars from balance of power politics, from thinking that somehow the rules don't matter, and we can't afford to head in that direction again.
Zaid, thank you so much for being here. That's Zaid Ra'ad Al Hussein. He's former UN Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Always great to have you here, Zaid.
Thank you so much.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
excited by business changes.
Are you finding the talent that you need?
They're thrilled by tech developments.
What would surprise people about where AI is going?
But what really makes Carol Masser and Jason Kelly happy is telling you about all of it.
This is an industry that is in demand.
Bloomberg Business Week.
What will society ultimately decide?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston. The tide may be finally turning for the NCAA. This week, NCAA voted unanimously to allow student athletes to profit off their own image and likeness. Our next guest writes, quote, more and more people no longer buy what the NCAA is selling. It has become such a popular issue that it has gained bipartisan political support in this polarized age. Welcome now, Bloomberg opinion columnist Joe Nocera, who is also the author of Indentured, the battle to end the exploitation of college athletes, which might give you away a little bit of your point of view, I think, Joe. I'm not sure. But so tell us exactly what the NCAA is at least considering doing.
Well, first of all, California has already passed a law that says athletes can get their name, image, and likeness money, endorsement money, autograph money, starting in 2023, and they can't be punished and they can't be thrown out off the team. That's what so the NCAA, and there are now 12, 13, 14 states that are about to do the same thing, and the federal government, Congress, is also getting involved. So the NCAA is kind of being dragged along here, kicking and screaming. They put out a very vague statement that said, we realize we have to modernize, we realize that we have to give benefits, they didn't say the word money, benefits to athletes for their name, image, and likeness, but, we haven't figured it all out yet. That's basically what they said.
So it sounds like the NCAA is jumping before they're pushed, essentially. They're going to get pushed into this.
They're going to get pushed harder. Let me tell you. NCAA, the battle that's coming is going to be who controls the process. The NCAA would like to be able to control this process because they want to make sure boosters don't use money to lure students, athletes to other schools. They don't want them to get too much money. But the legislators have really, they don't believe the NCAA anymore, and they're not willing to give the NCAA the years that they want to put this in place. So the legislators are basically saying, we're going to do this, and you can either follow us or not.
If this all happens, as it appears it's likely to, is this the official end of the myth of the student athlete? I mean, the theory was they're amateurs and they're getting educations, things like that. We know a lot of people don't actually graduate who are the top athletes. But are we basically saying, forget it, they're not really going to college to get an education. They're going to be a farm school for professional.
Well, that's already happening. But we just don't admit it, right? Sure. So, I think it's the beginning of an acknowledgement that when you put 50 hours a week in a sport, and when the sport is actually more important than anything you do in the classroom, at least for the school, you should get some money for it. So this is the first step, allowing endorsements. I personally believe 10 years from now, athletes will be getting cold hard cash as salaries from the universities.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is not coming from the university. This is a Nike or somebody else doing licensing.
Or EA Sports.
EA Sports, exactly right. But so another step is to say to the University of Michigan, my alma mater, by the way, you can't keep all that money. Some of it has to go to your students who are really kind of employees.
That's where we're headed, in my view. But this is the first step.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe. Great to have you here.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Bloomberg Opinion. And now we're going to bring in Anna Edgerton on that top story of the day, and that is, of course, the vote in the House to officially begin the impeachment inquiry, which I guess makes it public. So it was pretty partisan, Anna.
It was, and that was the most remarkable thing about this vote, that it was a vote that no Republicans voted for. This was a victory for Steve Scalise, the Republican vote counter, and he actually made it so that this is a partisan thing that Nancy Pelosi now has to defend to the American people as an actual constitutional process that didn't get any Republican votes.
So, I mean, we always go a little ahead of ourselves when you go look for it, assuming there were articles of impeachment, and then the Senate had to consent, et cetera. This does not bode well for getting 2/3 of the Senate to vote on it. But it's basically what the Democrats are saying is we have to find a smoking gun beyond what's already been revealed.
That was what was remarkable about looking at the different Republican and Democratic press conferences. Democrats already think they have the evidence. So the fact that they know the facts, they say the facts are self-evident, that we already have impeachable offenses before us. Republicans say that's absolutely not the case. So we'll see how it changes as it goes into the public phase, but that's what we're working with right now.
We'll see, but as we know, the impeachment process is somewhat legal, but a lot of politics itself. And those representatives wouldn't be voting the way they voted today, the Republicans, if they didn't think their constituents were headed in that direction as well.
That's exactly right. And that's especially true in the House of Representatives, because representatives have a very small district. They represent a very tightly drawn group of people. Senators, on the other hand, represent an entire state. So the calculation could be slightly different for senators, especially from states like Colorado or Iowa that have a bit more of a bipartisan makeup to the population.
The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, reportedly sort of slow-walked this, was reluctant to go this direction. But in the end, is she leading or is she following? Does she have to do this to keep up with her caucus, or is she really leading this?
That's a really good question. It might be a little bit of both. You know, she waited for her moderate freshmen to come out in favor of this. There were 7 freshmen who said, we support this inquiry, and that's when she really took the step. But now she is not only leading the process, but also making sure that her members are united. They only lost 2 Democrats on this vote, which is a pretty good showing for her.
Well, and you raised the freshmen. I guess we still call them freshmen, although a lot of them are women, right? Those first-year representatives who were there, a lot of those came from districts who had gone for Donald Trump in the presidential. Do we see a shift there so those people feel a little safer voting for the impeachment than they did perhaps 6 months ago?
There's some eye towards polls on this to see where the American public is. There has been a slight upswing in support for impeachment, but some of these members just got to the point where they say what we've seen from this president is so bad that to do our constitutional duty, we have to begin impeachment proceedings. That is what we as the House of Representatives is called to do.
A vote on principle. That's something we can look for. Okay, thank you so much to Anna Edgerton. Great to have you here in New York today. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we're going to talk to Carlyle Group co-founder David Rubenstein on his new book, his views on tax policy, and much, much more. That's coming up on This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Enjoy that French champagne now because it's about to get pricier. A World Trade Organization ruling earlier this month gave a green light to the U.S. to impose $7.5 billion in tariffs on European Union products, including wines from France, Spain, Germany, and the U.K. The 25% tax on the wines will mean U.S. retail price hikes of as much as 15%. If you think that's a price hike, consider the vintage green cardigan Kurt Cobain wore for Nirvana's iconic performance on MTV's Unplugged. It just sold for $334,000. Animal rights fans, take heart. New York City Council is voting to ban sales of foie gras in gourmet stores and restaurants, a move its members say will help end inhumane force feeding of ducks and geese to obtain their fatty livers. A majority of members signed on as sponsors of the legislation. Farmers and restaurant owners say it could kill about 400 jobs and put about $150 million in economic impact at stake. Visit BloombergPursuits.com. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
To see something far away, you can either get a powerful telescope or you can go there.
Talk about export numbers because they've been quite shocking. Korea, we saw Singapore, Japan too.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
How should investors be positioning?
When you take a look at the consumers in China, it remains challenging.
We go there.
To what extent is access to cheap credit part of the equation?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing. You. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all declining on this Thursday. Stocks dropping the most in 3 weeks this week. Manufacturing data and renewed concern on trade rattled markets, adjusting to the Federal Reserve signal yesterday that it is done easing. Treasuries, gold, and the yen rose. Right now we've got the 10-year of 21/32 with the yield of 1.69%. We've got the S&P down 19. That is a drop of 0.6%. The Dow lower now by 231 points, down 0.9, and NASDAQ down 38, a drop there of just about 0.5%. Facebook shares are moving higher after last night's earnings report. Facebook now higher by 1.8%. It reported results that beat projections. Social networks also forecasting increased sales and steady user growth. And we spoke with Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg.
We have now 2.8 billion people, about 2.8 billion using our family of apps, and everything's growing: Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp. And importantly, the Facebook core app is growing, including in the United States.
And again, Facebook shares rallying 1.8% worldwide. Facebook's monthly user base grew by 35 million, including 3 million new users in North America. President Trump today resumed his attacks on the Fed and its chairman, Jay Powell, a day after it cut rates for the third time this year. In a tweet, the president said, quote, "People are very disappointed in Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. The Fed has called it wrong from the beginning. Too fast, too slow." Economic growth could be wobbling. Consumer spending trailed forecasts in September. The data offered a note of caution after the Fed signaled it is refraining from future interest rate cuts. Jobless claims edged higher last week, rising to 218,000. Government issues its monthly report on payroll growth tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time. Complete coverage and analysis, as you have come to expect over the years, from Bloomberg Radio. And our weekly Consumer Comfort Index dropped by the most in 8 years. Consumers' assessments of the economy, their finances, and buying climate all pulled back just in time for the holidays. Gold up 1.1%, $15.11 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down now by 1.7%, $54.10 a barrel. 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are falling more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 1%, and the S&P 500 is lower by 0.6%. Voting ADRs of Royal Dutch Shell are down 3.5%, and non-voting ADRs of the oil company are down 4%. The UK-based energy producers' revenue trailed analyst average estimate in the Bloomberg survey for the second straight quarter. Shell said a worsening economy may slow the pace of stock buybacks and debt repayments. Another oil company, Canada's Encana, has dropped 7.7%. Third quarter earnings came up short of estimates. Encana said it will relocate to the U.S. next year and change its name to Ovintiv. Germany's Bayer has climbed 3.5%. The drug and chemical company and Johnson & Johnson settled a lawsuit with Mylan over the blood thinner Xarelto. The case involved a generic version of Xarelto, which is Bayer's biggest selling medicine. And Japan's Nintendo has risen 4.5%. The video game maker's revenue and operating income for the fiscal second quarter beat the average estimates. Nintendo benefited from game sales tied to last month's introduction of the Switch Lite player, Charlie.
And we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, following those American depository receipts. So again, recapping, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all lower. Trade and economic data combining to send the S&P down 17, a drop now of 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
The House votes to proceed with the impeachment inquiry. President Trump still isn't satisfied with Jay Powell's Fed, and China may have given up on an overall trade deal with the United States. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. Chinese officials are doubtful that a comprehensive long-term trade deal can be reached, even as the two sides are close to signing a so-called Phase 1 agreement. For more on this, we welcome now former USTR General Counsel. He's Stephen Vaughn, and he's now with the law firm of King & Spalding. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. You know Bob Lighthizer, the ambassador, the trade representative, terribly well. Is he going to be satisfied with just the Phase 1 agreement?
Well, I think that the ambassador has made very clear, the president's made very clear that we need to have structural change from China. You know, they're stealing intellectual property and they're forcing people into joint ventures, and we need to have a real structural change if this relationship is going to go where it wants to go. So I think you're going to see the administration keep pushing for those structural changes.
So let's separate as best we know, and I don't know, I suspect you don't know specifically what is in so-called Phase 1 as opposed to the rest of the deal. If it were Phase 1, it gets signed because the White House said today they're going to go ahead despite the cancellation of the APEC, meaning they're going to find some place for the two presidents to sign it. What's in that Phase 1?
Well, I think what they've talked about so far, and it's, again, like you said, nobody knows for sure, but the president has indicated that there will be more lifting of restrictions on U.S. agriculture. Ambassador Lighthizer said there was going to be structural changes to make it easier for U.S. farmers to make sales in China. The president said that Chinese had promised to make more agricultural purchases. And it sounds like they were talking about making some progress on IP and maybe financial services. But we won't know for sure until we see the actual details.
So, as a practical matter, what leverage can the United States bring to bear to have those structural changes? That is not the Phase 1, but the more fundamental ones, because some of these go to the very heart of the way the Chinese economy runs.
Well, I think there's kind of two different questions. The first question is, can we persuade China to change? And the next question is, what do we do if China refuses to change? And I think what the president is doing is he's offering he's making an offer to China, which is to say, we want to work with you, we want to have a good deal, we want to have a good trading relationship, but you have to change. You have to treat us more fairly. If you're not willing to change, then we're going to go in a different direction, and that's what you see with the tariffs. So really the choice is up to China. They can have the tariffs, or they can have a better relationship with the United States. It's up to them, ultimately. But what the president is saying is we're not going to let you keep cheating and keep having free access to the U.S. market.
Is there a third issue as well, Stephen, which is the possibility, because we have, I think, seen it before, the Chinese agree, but then they don't follow through on their agreement. How can we enforce it?
That's a very good question. It's obviously something the administration is giving a lot of thought to. Any agreement is going to have to be enforceable, and I think that's something that the whole USTR team and the president are going to give a lot of thought to. So I think the first question is China willing to even make the promises. The second question is, what do you do if you don't comply? And, you know, I think those are all things that are still being negotiated, but it is a real question and one that everybody should take seriously.
So you've worked inside the Trade Representative's office. In fact, you were acting Trade Representative while Bob Lighthizer was getting confirmed. By all accounts, these trade negotiations depend critically on trust between the principal negotiators. Is that relationship of trust between Liu He, the chief negotiator for China, and Bob Lighthizer, our ambassador and trade representative, is it there?
Well, I think they have a very good relationship, and I think they work together quite well. Obviously, the bigger question is, does Liu He really represent the Chinese government, and is President Xi willing to do the things that, you know, the Chinese representatives indicate that he may be willing to do? As you will recall, in April and May, they thought they were very close to a deal, and then it turned out that China backed away. Similarly, a few weeks ago, the president seemed to be very enthusiastic about some of the things that they said to him, and now we're seeing reports in the press of China telling other things to reporters that may be different from what they told the president. To me, that's the bigger issue, is does Liu He really represent President Xi, and can he really speak for the Chinese government?
So, Stephen, let's bring this back to North America and specifically USMCA, that successor agreement to NAFTA. It's pending before Congress. There's questions whether it's going to get ratified or not. The Democrats have said they need to make some changes, particularly on enforcement. From the best of your understanding, are these changes that could be done?
Oh, I think the administration certainly wants to make sure that there's enforcement of USMCA. And let's just all remind ourselves that right now in NAFTA, there's no enforceable labor provisions at all, no enforceable environmental provisions at all, just side letters that don't really have any authority at all. So the labor provisions, the environmental provisions in USMCA are much, much stricter than what's in the NAFTA. And I think the administration wants to make sure they want those provisions themselves, and they want them to be enforced.
Yeah, so we actually heard from Speaker Pelosi about exactly the commitment to USMCA. This is what she said.
We are moving with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, making progress every day. I'm optimistic that we are still on a path to yes, and that we will come to conclusion soon on that.
Is that consistent with your understanding of where it stands in the House?
Yeah, I think most people in town are optimistic. There's a lot of support for USMCA among the business community, among farmers, on the Hill, in the Senate, in the House. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for it, and I really think it'll be good for everybody when it moves forward, and I'm hopeful that Speaker Pelosi will let it move forward.
One last question. Go to Europe, because that's still pending out there. I haven't heard much about Europe recently. Does that stand?
So the Europeans, as you know, indicated that they were not really interested in negotiating with the United States on agricultural issues. That's a very sensitive issue for the U.S., obviously, and so that's made it more difficult for the U.S. and Europe to engage directly. They've also been undergoing their own transition. They're changing over the European Commission, and they're going to have new commissioners soon, and that's led to some complicating factors as well. And we'll just have to wait and see. And obviously, they've been distracted by Brexit. But again, I think that's a situation. The European economy is clearly slowing. They have some real problems over there, and you would hope that they'll be more willing to work with the U.S. and move some of these things along.
Many thanks to Stephen Vaughn of King & Spalding. The House of Representatives has set out its procedure for pursuing possible impeachment of President Trump. We talk next with former federal prosecutor Bob Mintz of McCarter and English. This is Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
Directors of companies are responsible to boards.
Let's begin with the IPO that may not be for a long, long time.
Politicians are mindful of voters.
Are those gains all going to the elite?
Scholars pay attention to data.
Does it spread beyond manufacturing?
And nearly everyone at the top of these professions listens to Bloomberg Surveillance.
Everybody listens when I'm on your show.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Ferro. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the Lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Join us in New York City on November 21st as Bloomberg Pursuits convenes the second annual The Year Ahead Luxury. Speakers include Jennifer Hyman, CEO Rent the Runway, Alessandro Bogliolo, CEO Tiffany & Company, Robert A.M. Stern, renowned architect. Supporting sponsor, Diamond Producers Association. Participating sponsor, St. Regis Hotels and Resorts. For more information, go to BloombergLive.com/TYA Luxury. Invitation code radio.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
It's another Thursday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick to enjoy a warm Bayesian welcome.
How are you doing? Enjoying the sunshine?
Fly from London Gatwick to Barbados with British Airways, with flights and 7 nights hotel from just £699 per person. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want crime dramas, I've got loads, and they're never gonna guess who did it. Horrors, no problem. It's not real, it's not real, it's not real. Or how about dramas? OMG, I've got Chernobyl. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus, month passes auto renew, terms apply.
Can I have chemo at home?
It's only suitable for a couple of types of
cancer.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 4040. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
Toss to the right, throws to the end zone, caught by Fells!
15, 10, 5, touchdown Green Bay!
Today, for your Halloween, hear the home and away call as the San Francisco 49ers visit the Arizona Cardinals at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Back, what a block! Touchdown for Tevin Coleman going the other way! Touchdown!
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today. College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard.
It is the annual Florida-Georgia College Football Showdown. This year, there are more than just bragging rights on the line. With both teams ranked in the top 10, will it be the Gators or Bulldogs leaving Jacksonville on top of the SEC East and in the driver's seat for the conference championship? Find out this Saturday with kickoff starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Search college football to listen.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket. The roar of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut
to
it.
the sideline, the man fleet for 3.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now. Hear it live on TuneIn.
Pump fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on
Search
the right.
NBA today to start listening.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks down the most in 3 weeks as weak manufacturing data and renewed concern on trade rattles markets, adjusting to the Fed signal that it is done easing. Treasuries, gold, and the yen rose. Right now, the 10-year up 21.30 seconds yield, 1.69%. Gold up 1%. $15.11 the ounce. Crude oil pulling back. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.7%, $54.13 a barrel. The Dow lower by 223 points, down 0.8%. S&P down 18 points at 3,028, down 0.6. NASDAQ lower by 35, a drop there of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Robert Mintz served as assistant counsel for New Jersey Governor Tom Keene as an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey, where he rose to deputy chief of the Organized Crime Strike Task Force Division. He now heads the white-collar criminal practice at McCarter and English. And welcome to Bloomberg, where I'm joined, as in all things law, by my colleague June Grasso. So, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. First, let's go through the process that the House approved today. As I understand it, it doesn't open up everything. We will still have Adam Schiff behind closed doors in the Intelligence Committee, but then he refers it over to Judiciary, and Judiciary opens it up.
Yeah, David, that's exactly what this resolution says. It's really kind of a two-step process where the Intelligence Committee, chaired by Congressman Schiff, will, and that's the committee that, by the way, that has been conducting these closed-door depositions. They will now move to open hearings or public testimony, and from that, they will compile findings in a report, which will include transcripts of testimony and additional evidence, and they'll report that to the Judiciary Committee. That begins what will be the second phase, and that's the point at which the president's lawyers can actively participate in that process to cross-examine witnesses and to take a more active role in that process. And that's, of course, the committee that will ultimately consider whether or not to vote to recommend articles of impeachment to the full House.
So in the vote today, earlier today, not one single Republican voted to support this, which caused the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, to question exactly what they were troubled by.
I don't know why the Republicans are afraid of the truth. Every member should support allowing the American people to hear the facts for themselves. That is really what this vote is about.
So, Bob, does she have a point there? Because now they've said, okay, we will open it up. We will allow cross-examination by the president or his lawyer.
Well, the Republicans have been complaining that by the time this thing gets to Judiciary and the president's lawyers will be able to participate, it's really kind of a done deal, and that so much of this has gone behind closed doors. But in fact, this is the process that really had been used both during the Clinton and Nixon impeachments. One of the big distinctions between what we saw with President Clinton and what we're seeing here now is that the underlying basis for the articles of impeachment in the Clinton case were really done by this independent counsel, Kenneth Starr, and all of that was done behind closed doors. Here, there's a different situation, and this is where the Republicans are criticizing the way the Democrats are handling it, because here the House itself has to actually create the record, and they're doing that behind closed doors the same way Kenneth Starr did in the Clinton case. But again, that was an independent counsel, and this is the House. But ultimately, Republicans do have an opportunity to cross-examine these witnesses, and the president's lawyers will also have an opportunity to play a role in this once it gets to the Judiciary Committee.
So, Bob, do you think that once we have the open hearings, the Republicans will have to drop these process arguments and get to what President Trump says he wants to get to them? He wants them to get to, which is the content.
Well, I do think it becomes more difficult to argue that process point once this is all out in the public and done in open sessions. And that's going to happen right away, even with the Intelligence Committee. So you can make the process arguments, but when you have the opportunity to cross-examine these witnesses, I think it is more of an uphill battle. What Republicans will still complain about, however, is the fact that while they can request the committee to issue subpoenas, that decision ultimately still rests with the Democrats. So Republicans can say, we want to call this witness or that witness, and ultimately the Democrats have to agree. Otherwise, those subpoenas will not be issued.
Now, in the procedures that the House has set out for the formal hearings that will be in public, have they done enough to ensure that you won't have the kind of hearings that you had, for example, when Corey Lewandowski was before the Intelligence Committee?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen how those hearings are actually going to be conducted. Usually there are lawyers who participate in that, and usually the questions are more geared towards getting answers from witnesses as opposed to stonewalling by witnesses or members of Congress simply giving speeches that don't really ask questions. So hopefully this will be a more substantive hearing where witnesses can be questioned and answers can be heard by the public.
Bob, give us a sense of the timetable here, because there are certainly some indications that there may be some assertions, for example, of executive privilege, as there was back in the Nixon investigation, actually. If, in fact, the White House really says we're going to resist as many of these subpoenas as we can, how much could that slow things down? Because we do, after all, have an election next year.
Yeah, well, and up until now, David, that's exactly what the White House has done. They've said they're going to fight subpoenas. They're directing executive branch employees not to participate. The leverage that the Democrats have at this point is they've said that if there is that kind of behavior, which they view as obstructive, they can curtail the ability of the president's lawyers to cross-examine witnesses during those Judiciary Committee hearings. And so that is some kind of leverage, but ultimately this is going to move forward. There's no timetable on it. And it's important to remember, too, that although we talk a lot about this as if it is a criminal process, and we throw around terms like due process and the right to cross-examine and confront witnesses and all of that, this is still fundamentally a political process, not a criminal process. And as Gerald Ford famously said, an impeachable offense is whatever a majority of the House of Representatives considers it to be at any given moment in history. That's really what we're looking at here.
Bob, is there really enough room for the president to take part in these proceedings by the House rules?
Well, this is really the process that's been used in the prior impeachment proceedings. There are no rules in the Constitution as to how this should go forward. It's really largely left up to the House of Representatives, as is the trial in the Senate left up to the Senate as to how that process is going to go forward. So it's really a political calculus, I think, on the part of the president and his legal team, how much role they want to play in the House proceedings, although they'll be given an opportunity to do so now, or do they want to wait until this moves to the Senate?
Okay, thanks very much to Bob Mintz of the McCarter and English law firm. Well, he co-founded the Carlyle Group, but he's always had a passion for history and has resulted in a new book. David Rubenstein joins us now on The American Story. That's coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. stocks are falling on trade jitters. Bloomberg News reports China doesn't think a long-term trade deal is possible. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 212 points to 26,976. S&P 500 down 0.5%. The Nasdaq dropping 0.4%. Shares of Wayfair are falling after the online home goods retailer forecast a disappointing outlook for the holiday season. And hundreds of local UAW leaders meet in Detroit tomorrow to review a tentative contract with Ford Motor Company. The two sides reached an agreement last night. They likely averted a strike like the one that cost General Motors billions of dollars. Ford promised to invest $6 billion in U.S. facilities. The automaker also pledged to create and retain 8,500 jobs. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
It's another Thursday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and enjoy stunning white sand and crystal blue sea. Fly from London Gatwick to the Maldives with British Airways from £300 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want reality TV, I can fill that island-shaped hole. Football? How about the Premier League? Or how about dramas? I've got Emmy-winning shows. Ooh, I know, so fancy. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus month passes auto-renew. Terms apply.
Hey NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can hear every NFL game live as it's happening, or catch it later on demand. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
For some, Halloween is a little more serious than candy and costumes. To give your Hallows Eve a truly frightening feeling, turn on Soma FM's special Doom Station to hear a haunting seance of soundscapes made for tortured souls, the living dead, and cursed spirits of the night. Search Doom Special and tune in to run a chill down your spine this Halloween.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane of the rim, throwing right corner three, another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Hello, ghoulies. We have all the treats. This October, there's no better place to listen to your favorite audio than on TuneIn. From the NFL, the World Series, and the start of the NHL and NBA seasons, we have tons of spooky podcasts and the music for any costume party. Sports, news, podcast, music, and more. Soundtrack your Halloween with TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, David Rubenstein joins us to talk about his new book, The American Story, and what history can teach us about the country today. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
And I thank you very much. In our story today, we've got a Halloween sell-off. Stocks falling the most in 3 weeks as weak manufacturing data and renewed concern on trade rattled markets, adjusting to yesterday's Fed signal that it is done easing. Treasuries, gold, and the yen rose. Inflation data monitored by the Fed did moderate in September. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The PCE price index, the Fed targets it for 2% inflation, rose just 1.3% year over year, the smallest gain since February. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says it's crucial for the Fed to hit its target. Falling prices can depress wages. And yet low inflation has allowed the Fed to cut interest rates 3 times this year to boost growth. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
President Trump has resumed his attacks on the Fed and its chairman Jay Powell a day after it cut rates for the third time this year. In a tweet, the president said, quote, people are very disappointed in Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. Quote, the Fed has called it wrong from the beginning, too fast, too slow. S&P 500 index now down 15 points. That's a drop of 0.5%. The Dow is down 201 points, down 0.7%. NASDAQ down 27, a drop there of 0.3%. Again, stocks tumbling on data and trade woes. 10-year up 22. 30 seconds yield 1.69%. Gold up 1.1%, 15.12 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude retreating 1.7%, 54.13 a barrel. Recapping, S&P down 15 at 3,031, a drop of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of power continues now, and once again, here is David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. David Rubenstein is best known for co-founding the Carlyle Group in Washington, where he is now co-executive chairman. But those in Washington also know of his deep dedication to history, something he supported, among other things, through philanthropy, such as investments in the Washington Monument and, most recently, the Jefferson Memorial. Since 2013, David has conducted a series of live interviews at the Library of Congress with a remarkable group of U.S. historians, and he's now put those interviews together in a book, The American Story, a conversation with master historians. We welcome now David Rubenstein. Welcome, David. Great to have you here.
My pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I'm going to quote from your book. You quote from George Santayana, the philosophy professor, who says, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So as you look through these terrific stories in this book, pick one out that you think we could learn from right now in the United States, a lesson from history that could help us right now.
Well, there's no doubt that Richard Nixon's situation was one that we may have to see some repetition of, because there was an impeachment inquiry for Richard Nixon. He resigned before the House actually voted on impeachment, and there was no trial in the Senate. I don't know what will exactly happen in the House, but it seems as if they're moving forward with some type of impeachment resolution that probably will pass with most of the Democratic votes. Richard Nixon did not destroy the tapes. And in hindsight, had he destroyed the tapes, maybe the smoking gun wouldn't have been there and he might have survived. But the documentary evidence was just too strong, I think, for him to be able to keep his support in the Republicans. I don't know what will happen here. I don't want to predict. But what I try to do, and just to make it clear to the listeners, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of bring members of Congress together, and to do that in a social setting that would not involve politics and so forth. So about 6 years ago, I started interviewing great American historians like Doris Kearns Goodwin, David McCullough, John Meacham, Robert Caro, in front of members of Congress. And we draw about 250 members, maybe sometimes 300 members and their guests to these dinners. And the members are like school children. They come with their dog-eared copies of the books. They want them autographed just like everybody else wants them autographed. They've all read these books in part because they're interested in history. Members of Congress tend to be interested in government history, and so they're actually quite knowledgeable. I do the interview, but then they have questions as well. And the members are encouraged to sit with people from the opposite party so that they get to know people in a setting where they're not normally able to do so. Normally in Washington, D.C., Democrats and Republicans don't socialize together. They don't travel as much anymore. And also members of the House and the Senate don't know each other as well as they used to because they don't have as many conference committees. There's not that much legislation. So people from one House don't really know people in the other House. So anyway, this is an effort to bring them together. I think members of Congress enjoy it a great deal. And I thought I'd take some of the best interviews and put them together and give my assessment of them.
Are you making any progress on the bipartisanship? I'm sure they get along just fine together. I mean, even talk about the vote that we had this morning. Now, one single Republican went the other way. That's different, actually, from Watergate and Nixon.
The era of good feelings has not broken out, except when they come to these dinners, they are very hospitable to each other and very friendly. But when they go back to their respective corners, it probably doesn't lead to a great friendship. On the other hand, members of Congress encourage me to continue it, so it's my little way to kind of bring people together and to educate people about this. And I think I'm very concerned about this aspect of our educational system now, not just with members of Congress. We don't teach history as much as we used to. We don't teach civics as much as we used to. The result of that is this. Right now, 3/4 of Americans cannot name the three branches of government. 75% cannot name the three branches. 1/3 of Americans cannot name one branch of government. 10% of American college graduates think that Judge Judy is a member of the United States Supreme Court. And amazingly, recently a survey was done by Woodrow Wilson Foundation. It said to naturalized citizens, if you want to be if you're a naturalized citizen, you have to take a citizenship test after 5 years of residency. 91% of the people that take that test passed. The same test was given to native-born Americans. And the citizens in 49 out of 50 states failed. In other words, they couldn't pass the basic citizenship test. Now, presumably if they studied, maybe they could. So it's sad that we don't really know much about history and civics. And my hope is if people will read this book, which is a series of interviews of the best historians in our country about some of their best books, their appetite will be whetted to maybe read the whole books that these authors have written or learn more about American history.
We have a tendency, when we start talking about American history, to think about men. Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. You actually cover some women in this book, too, with someone who's a dear friend I worked with, sadly, recently left us, Cokie Roberts.
Well, as she would say in the interview, it's called his story, not her story. Maybe that's where the word came from, because the history of our world, to some extent, is about the history of great men as opposed to great women. Obviously, that's changing a bit. Cokie Roberts wrote 3 terrific books about what women have done in our country where they didn't get a lot of attention for it. One was in the Revolutionary War era. One was after the Revolutionary War era, and then one was in the Civil War era. And what she pointed out is that even though women couldn't vote, couldn't hold office, and amazingly, and for much of our history, women couldn't own property if they were married in their own name. You had women like John Adams' wife, Abigail Adams, or Martha Washington, who played big roles in their husbands' lives. They just didn't get a lot of credit for it. And she learned this by reading the letters between these spouses. She realized that these people were really influenced. These great men were influenced by their wives. In some cases, the wives had much better ideas about where the country should go than the men did.
Coming all the way up to the present, you also interview our Chief Justice. So this is something you and I are both interested in. We're both recovering lawyers. I think we can say that.
You're a former Supreme Court
I did clerk on the Supreme Court. Yeah, just the year before John Roberts, actually.
So for those who don't know, to be a Supreme Court clerk, you have to be one of the best law school students in the class that year. And you were at the University of Michigan.
I was University of Michigan, that's true.
So you clerked on the court. And I would say that John Roberts was a clerk as well. At one point, he had clerked for Rehnquist. And I wanted to interview him, although he's not a well-known historian. I wanted to interview him because I thought members of Congress should learn a little bit more about the Chief Justice because they don't really deal with him that much. And he agreed to do this because I'm the chairman of the Smithsonian, he's the chancellor, and we spend time together, and I guess he was willing to do a favor for me. So I interviewed him, and I said, did you always want to be Chief Justice of the United States? And he said, no. Did you want to be a justice at all in the court? No. Did you want to be a judge? No. Did you want to be a lawyer? No. Well, what did you want to be? I wanted to be a historian. That's all I cared about. My father said, John, there's no money in being a historian. You'll write books, nobody will read them. He said, I don't care. So he went to Harvard, majored in history, came back from spring break one day, and he gets in a cab at the Boston airport, says to the cab driver, take me to Cambridge. Are you a student at Harvard? The cab driver asked. Yes, I am. What are you majoring in? History. And the cab driver said, well, when I was a student at Harvard, that's what I majored in also. So that John thought maybe he should get ready for some other career as well.
And he's done all right. And just briefly here at the end, one of the things that struck me about that interview, which I think is absolutely right from what I know of the court, is it's very collegial. He talks about the fact there are 9 of them, and they discuss these things. They just don't decide it on their own.
Yeah, there are 9 people who are put together not by any one of them deciding they want to be with these other 8, but this is the way it works, and they have to get along, or if they don't get along, they're going to have a very long set of meetings where it's going to be very boring. Now, sometimes, as you know, your history of the court, some justices refuse to talk to other justices. Justice McReynolds would not talk to Justice Brandeis because Brandeis was Jewish, and he refused to talk to anybody who was Jewish. But generally, we don't have that kind of situation any longer.
We've made at least some progress. Look, I'm delighted to say that David Rudenstine will be staying with us. We have a lot to talk about the U.S. economy, income inequality, and so much more. That all is coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
In-depth.
It's another Thursday afternoon. Yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick to see spectacular coral reefs and white sand beaches. Fly from London Gatwick to Mauritius with British Airways, with flights and 7 nights hotel from just £949 per person. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
Want to know what's happening in right now? The latest headlines are just a tap away with Fox News Talk on TuneIn. When news breaks, get up-to-the-minute coverage on developing stories from around the world. Plus, hear all the Fox shows you watch on your TV. Listen to Fox News Talk around the clock on TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations,
Live commercial-free news,
and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game.
Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Looking for a new podcast to inspire your work life? On the latest edition of Pod Club, Adam Grant, host of TED Podcast Work Life, shares the pods that have blown his mind.
My all-time favorite episode of the podcast is How to Love Criticism. I went to Bridgewater, where a manager was told in front of 200 colleagues that he was the single worst manager at the company. And I came away convinced that we all have a support network, but we also need a challenge network.
Go to Podcast on TuneIn to see Adam's Pod Club picks.
ESPN Radio and TuneIn just go hand in hand. Hi, this is Mel Kiper Jr. reminding you that all of your favorite ESPN Radio shows and events are right here on TuneIn. Just search ESPN Radio to begin enjoying it today.
Far wing elevates, triple bucket.
The roar of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut
The
it.
sideline, the man bleeds for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the right
Search
block.
NBA today to start listening.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest and greatest audio on the app. Explore exclusive content. Learn about hot new podcasts and get alerted when the big game, well, it's about to begin. Add TuneIn to your feed and be in the know when it matters most.
For some, Halloween is a little more serious than candy and costumes. To give your Hallows Eve a truly frightening feeling, turn on Soma FM's special Doom Station to hear a haunting seance of soundscapes made for tortured souls, the living dead, and cursed spirits of the night. Search Doom Special on TuneIn to run a chill down your spine this Halloween.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way
way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet.
It is the annual Florida-Georgia College Football Showdown. This year, there are more than just bragging rights on the line. With both teams ranked in the top 10, will it be the Gators or Bulldogs leaving Jacksonville on top of the SEC East and in the driver's seat for the conference championship? Find out this Saturday with kickoff starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Search college football to listen.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all moving lower. Stocks dropping the most in 3 weeks. Weak manufacturing data and renewed concern on trade rattling markets today. S&P down 16. That's a drop of 0.5%. The S&P now at 3030. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 205, down 0.8%. NASDAQ down 30, a drop of 0.4%. 10 years up 24.30 seconds, yield 1.68%. Gold up 1.1%, 15.12 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 1.7%, 54.14 a barrel. Brent 60.17, it is lower by 0.7%. So again, recapping, stocks dropping on data and trade woes. We've got the S&P down 16, a drop of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues, the Halloween edition. Once again, here he is, David Weston.
The Halloween edition is very special. Thank you so much to Charlie Pellet. Live from the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power, and I'm David Weston. David Rubenstein, co-executive chairman of the Carlyle Group and author of the new book, The American Story, is still with us. So, David, since we have you, let's talk a little about the economy and where we are and where we are going.
I think at the moment, most economists would say that we're not heading into recession in 2019 and probably not in 2020. Though I would point out that when a recession does occur, economists tend to bring papers out of the files and say, see, I told you it was here, you just didn't read my memo. So I'm sure that there's some memo in everybody's files saying that they predict a recession. But I don't think most people publicly predict a recession. I think President Trump knows that presidents who run for re-election in a recession don't usually win. George Herbert Walker Bush, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter, my former boss. Now, the last president who ran for re-election in a recession was William McKinley, and he didn't survive the second term. So I think President Trump is therefore trying, I think, as I would if I were in his situation, to keep the economy going as strong as I could make it for the re-election. And right now, I think we'll probably grow around 2% for this year. 2% is not 0%, it's not 4%. So right now, the economy around the world is slowing down a bit. China is slowing down, and Brexit is probably going to force the British economy to seem slower.
But okay, let's make you a prognosticator here. I'm sure you're comfortable with that. If we continue growing 2%, a little less than 2%, we keep our unemployment rate, if not at 50-year lows, close to it. Isn't it going to be awfully hard for anyone to beat an incumbent with that kind of economic record?
It's harder when you have a very good economy for an incumbent to lose. I'd say, there's an old saying in politics, you can't beat somebody with nobody. So you have to have somebody who's a credible person who has a chance of winning. And, I don't know who the Democratic nominee is going to be, but it's going to have to be somebody pretty strong. And you have to remember, the people campaign for the nomination for about a year and a half. And then the general election is only like 2 months. It's very brief. And so it's hard to change people's image. If you're very far to the left, it's hard to move to the center.
So if we don't talk about specific individuals, let's talk about ideas coming from the Democrats. As we listen to those debates, we've heard some of the candidates. Elizabeth Warren comes to mind, Bernie Sanders comes to mind, who say, okay, fine, overall, if you look at the top line numbers for the economy, it's just fine. But there are a lot of people hurting out there. There is growing income and wealth inequality. We must do something about this. And here's an idea, wealth tax. Do they have a point?
In other places where a wealth tax has been imposed, it has not solved all the social and inequality problems that exist there. In fact, many countries get rid of it. It's very hard to value somebody's wealth, and actually they don't have any cash. If you own a farm and you have a lot of wealth, what are you supposed to do? Now, the fear of people who have the wealth about the wealth tax, I think, generally is this. When the government of the United States starts taxes, they say, well, it's just going to affect a limited number of people. So let's say the income tax or the inheritance tax. But generally there's a fear by people that it will eventually come to affect them. So when Social Security first set up, I think it was 1% on first $4,000 of income. Now it's probably, I think, 9% on maybe $120,000 or so of income. So these things tend to accrete. And I think people are afraid that if there is a wealth tax, it eventually will affect them. That's why I don't think there's great support for it. And I also don't see any legislation moving through Congress. In other words, if somebody has a wonderful idea, why not propose it in Congress and push it through and get it done? Because most people know that these things aren't going to pass Congress. They're really just things for campaigns.
Whether there's the political will to do something, whatever it is or not, how important do you assess it to be that we address income and wealth inequality, both with respect to the social issues, the moral issues, but also, is it holding back the growth of the economy at some point?
Income inequality is as bad as it's been since the late 1920s. There's no doubt about it. I don't think if all the people in the Forbes 400 gave up all of their wealth, I don't think that's going to solve the problem, in part because you have an underclass in our society that has this problem, among other problems. 14% of the people in this country, adults, cannot read past the fourth grade level. If you can't read past the fourth grade level, you're not going to rise up no matter how much wealth tax there is. It just isn't going to happen. And right now, because people who can't read, they're very often in our prison system. 80% of the people in juvenile delinquency courts system are functionally illiterate. 2/3 of the federal prisoners are functionally illiterate. If you can't read, you're not going to be able to rise up. And so we also have a problem of social mobility. Right now, people at the bottom don't think that they can rise up to some extent because of a lot of issues. In my case, I grew up believing the American dream and thought I could rise up from a blue-collar family. But I think a lot of people today don't really think they can.
So, David, I wonder if you're pointing at I would call it a politically structural problem that we have in our economy. You talk about education, and most people who know something about it say that is a fundamental problem for this country. It's holding us back. I'll give you another one, deficits. A lot of people think it's a fundamental problem. Those are two subjects that I don't think I've heard even referred to in the debate stage. And by the way, if you go back to 2016, I don't remember either candidate, Democrat or Republican, referring to it. Where have we gotten to a place where, in fact, we have a presidential election and our candidates don't even address some things that many people think are really fundamental?
The deficit of the United States for this year will be over $1 trillion, our annual budget. And the accumulated debt is now about $23 trillion. When our country was first started, it was $70 million. Now it's $23 trillion. Nobody's talking about it because nobody has a solution for it. There are only three ways you can solve the problem, or four ways. Number one, increase taxes, not too popular. 2, cut spending, not too popular. 3, deal with entitlements, not too popular. Or get economic growth to 4 or 5%, not easy to do. It'd be popular, not easy to do. You can, of course, default on the U.S. debt, but nobody's proposed that. So there's no answer that's easy. And the only one that's really likely is after an election or a re-election, somebody would be bold and say, okay, I'm going to be a profile and courage. We've got to deal with entitlements. We've got to deal with taxes. But I don't see a lot of profiles of courage right now.
So, David, you have this wonderful book, The American Story, that goes through American history through the eyes of various great historians. Is this a potential issue for democracy itself? We are now competing increasingly against a China that has a very different structure. If President Xi decides to address something, he just goes and does it.
Well, you have to decide what society has the values you want to live in. If only thing you care about is getting economic growth and having a march towards a certain end, maybe a different system is better. Our system values other things, which is freedom, justice, liberty, among other things, equal opportunity. So our system is not perfect in all respects, but it's better than any other system I've seen.
Okay, many thanks to David Rubenstein. I think sort of quoting Winston Churchill there a little bit, or David Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group and author of The American Story. And now we look forward to the next hour. That's going to be Bloomberg Business Week, and we have Jason Kelly here. Jason, what are we doing?
I just want to hang around with David Rubenstein for the rest of the afternoon. Maybe we can just go through and sort of rewatch past episodes of the David Rubenstein Show. I mean, that would be fun. We are going to talk a lot about the markets. We're going to talk impeachment. We're going to talk a little bit going to the car world that you're so familiar with, David. We're going to talk about this Fiat Chrysler Peugeot.
How about that?
Tie-up. I'm not sure anybody really saw that coming. Maybe you did because you know a lot about cars, but it's quite a marriage there.
Yeah, it's quite a marriage. It's going to be the fourth largest if it goes forward. Yeah, is that right? It goes past GM and things like that.
Right.
At the same time, and listen, I don't know much about it except typically when you take two troubled companies and put them together, you don't get a healthy company.
Yeah, 1 + 1 equals point something. I think we're also going to check in with the head of Habitat for Humanity here in New York City. There's a new approach to affordable housing, and if I may editorialize, here in New York City and in cities like it, we certainly need it.
Yeah, and across the country, and President Trump has been pointing that out. It's a real problem. That is great. That's coming up on Bloomberg Business Week with Jason Kelly and Carol Masser. In the meantime, that does it for today for Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. We thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you will join us again tomorrow. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Carol
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this app. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
It's another Thursday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick. Experience Mexican culture and relax by the Caribbean Sea. Fly from London Gatwick to Cancun with British Airways from £275 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Hey NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you have unlimited access to every team and every game in the league. Listen live as it happens or on demand. Anytime, anywhere. All season long. Search NFL today. College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet.
It is the annual Florida-Georgia College Football Showdown. This year, there are more than just bragging rights on the line. With both teams ranked in the top 10, will it be the Gators or Bulldogs leaving Jacksonville on top of the SEC East and in the driver's seat for the conference championship? Find out this Saturday with kickoff starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Search college football to listen.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
There's all this money coming in and people were so excited, but it's all this money with no place to go.
Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine.
The cannabis story, we've seen those stocks continue to move around.
It's all about that sexy bombshell look.
Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The question is when sort of a list of bad news starts getting to be a reason to question purchasing a new couch.
Money's free, let's do this. Let's do this deal. This is amazing.
Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Halloween. That means it's October 31st, 2019, Thursday. Carol Masser along with my co-host Jason Kelly. No tricks, no treats, but man, a lot of news and trade. There's a T for you.
See, I was going to say we had treats and maybe a few tricks up our sleeve, so I don't know. We're going to see where this show goes. But first, let's get to Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on the trading day. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. Happy Thursday. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all in retreat. Stocks falling the most in 3 weeks. Weak manufacturing data and renewed concern on trade rattling markets. Here's where we stand this Halloween. We've got the S&P down 18. That is a drop of 0.6%. The S&P now at 3,028. The Dow down 231, a drop of 0.9%, and NASDAQ down 35, a decline there of 0.4%. 10 years up 25, 30 seconds, yield 1.68% right now. Gold up 1.1%, 15.11 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 1.5%, 54.22 a barrel. So again, recapping here, S&P 500 index down 18, a drop of 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week Halloween edition. In addition to trade, which we talked about at the top, we're also going to talk cars. Fiat Chrysler, Peugeot getting together. David Weston, he's definitely a car guy. He was saying to me a few minutes ago, Carol, not sure this is going to go great because when you put somebody who's struggling together with somebody else who's struggling, that doesn't often make for a happy marriage.
Maybe you just get bigger struggles. So we're going to talk about that. Twitter shares, man, they're just down about 0.4%. It was a story you and I broke down after, was it the close? It came out yesterday.
It was right on the heels of Facebook earnings. I mean, there's a lot of drama drama. We cannot give away an interview that we have running next week, but some really good commentary coming on that. But we're going to talk about it today with Shira Ovide.
Yep.
And she's got some hot takes, as she often does.
And we've also got a nice way to wrap up our programming today, and that's with the folks over at Habitat for Humanity, New York specifically, talking about affordable housing. They're not just talking about it, they're doing something about it. So we'll get into that in just a moment. First up, though, the Business Week agenda.
Let's set it with Joe Weisenthal, markets editor for Bloomberg and the co-host of What'd You Miss? That's coming up at 4 p.m. Wall Street time on BTV. And Dave Wilson, stocks editor, author of The Chart and the Stock of the Day. He'll have that for you throughout the show. Joe, I want to start with you. Yeah. What's the one thing people need to be thinking about today? Because it's a busy one, again, with headlines.
It absolutely is. You know, the big move, I think, happened a lot of pre-market, some of these trade headlines about the prospects for a long-term deal. That was sort of the major mover today, and we haven't actually moved a ton since then. And so I think it's just a reminder that that risk is still hanging out there. And it kind of reminds people that there isn't even a phase one deal yet. And so, you know, obviously...
Put one foot in front of the other, right?
Yeah, and look, this is not a huge sell-off. And it's really important not to overstate it. We've been on a pretty generally nice run, very close to all-time highs here. Yesterday, the market gained about 1/3%. So it's a modest sell-off, but I think trade would probably be the main source of anxiety. And then I would just say, you know, everything could change tomorrow with the jobs report.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one. Dave Wilson, what are you watching? What do investors need to know, in your view, on this Thursday?
Well, this looks like one of those days when companies don't get cut a break when their earnings or their revenue don't quite measure up to what analysts are looking for. I mean, you just look at the S&P 500, you see companies like Lincoln National, the insurer, down 10%. You see Hanes Brands, the apparel maker, lower by almost 10%. And, you know, it really gets your attention. Beyond that, I mean, you know, you kind of have trade coming back front and center with some of these results, particularly the online home furnishing seller Wayfair. That stock down 18%. Ouch. And among other things, they talked about how 90% of their Chinese suppliers have raised prices, which basically puts them in a position where they have to eat the increased costs, you know, and lower profit margins as a result of that, or they have to try passing them on to consumers and risk a drop in sales. So, you know, those are the kinds of issues that are worth paying attention to as the trade situation goes back and forth.
I think the number one thing to watch, well, there's many things. There's so much going on. But I am checking out the economic data, and that is the stuff on consumer spending, trailing forecasts in the month of September. Weekly applications for unemployment benefits rose more than projected. So I think it's interesting. Here we are one day after the Fed seems to signal a pause from interest rate cuts. Now we're seeing some more economic data points offering kind of a note of caution on the economy. I guess the question is, at this point, do they persist, and whether or not it becomes something more protracted, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I mentioned, obviously, the jobs report tomorrow. That'll tell us something. The data we got today, the one that was not great was Chicago PMI, one of the biggest drops in a long time. Some people noting that might have to do with some of the, you know, in the Midwest, the strikes that we've seen, Boeing.
General Motors.
And so maybe some of that will get resolved, is not necessarily reflective of broader themes. But, you know, the data today wasn't that amazing.
All right. Boy,
so I got to say,
some shade.
Yeah, a little womp.
Just not, you know, it's
all right. Whatever.
So one thing I'm watching, which we don't talk maybe as much about as we could, and it's interesting that we don't. Housing. There's a great story, Prashant Gopal and Chris Condon talking about how the headline says it all. Trump accidentally sparks U.S. housing rebound with trade wars. Trade war has led to lower interest rates. Lower interest rates means it's cheaper to get a mortgage. Cheaper mortgages means people saying, I'm going to buy a house. Like, maybe I will buy that house. This is not what typically happens at this part of an economic cycle.
Right.
And so as we continue to experience what we expect to happen doesn't always happen. And this ripple effect, I think, is a really, really interesting element of that. So it's one of the most read stories of the day.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it's really
You seem vaguely interested in that.
No, I am interested. I'm always interested in the housing market because I think it tells us so much. I was just like, okay.
Housing.
I got shade and you got housing. I'm just saying. Guys, so Joe, you've already talked about the jobs report. Dave, your thoughts in terms of the markets, what kind of reaction could we see based on whether or not it's strong or weak?
What it comes down to is whether, what the Fed has had to say this week about monetary policy is going to be affected at all by what the jobs numbers suggest. I mean, we kind of know what the course is, that they're going to back away from, really pushing hard to cut rates any further. So, if you get a number that suggests that things aren't so great, I mean, that really does kind of pose an existential kind of issue for the market. Just the whole idea that, you've got policy on one track, and if you end up with economic numbers on another track, especially the jobs figures, if nothing else, it's food for thought.
You know what I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I don't know if Dave is interested in this, release of a new bootleg Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan recordings from their their sessions in the 60s or the late 60s. So.
I think I might have pre-ordered it already.
What?
So that for the only time I've ever had something exceed the jobs report on Jobs Friday. In terms of what I'm looking forward to.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. We'll have to get a review from each of you next week. All right, thanks, guys. Joe Weisenthal, markets editor for Bloomberg and the co-host of What'd You Miss, coming up at 4 p.m. over on BTV. Dave Wilson, stocks editor. He'll be back in a bit with his chart and stock of the day. Carol?
Time for the bite of the day. The National Retail Federation estimates total Halloween spending will reach $8.8 billion this year, which is an average of more than $86 per person. What? Both figures represent small declines from the previous 2 years. Regardless of the decline, the survey suggests social media is driving more of that spending than ever before. I'm like watching pictures across nearly half of the millennials surveyed. 48% admitted to purchasing Halloween items solely for posting online. 4 in 10 millennials felt a lot of pressure to spend that money.
Oh, my goodness. Actually, there's a great scene in this week's Blackish, the show Blackish. Do you ever watch that? Yeah. Where basically they get in this great costume only for Instagram, and they're like, okay, we're done. We're done with Halloween.
Oh, my God. Now you got to go out. Get the candy.
Do you?
Yeah. Yes, you do.
All right.
Jason Kelly.
Bob Moon. He's got some world national headlines. Hey, Bob.
I got a rock. House Democrats issued the rule book for the forthcoming open hearings on potential impeachment of President Trump and put it up for a vote today. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the hearings and release of transcripts of closed-door witnesses will make the case.
Our procedures are more transparent, more open, giving more privileges to the president and his argument than were given in the past.
Republican Whip Steve Scalise said committee chairmen will have the power to rule on requests from Republican members.
We're not getting that fairness today. Maybe in the Soviet Union, you do things like this where only you make the rules.
Scalise was one of the Republicans who disrupted a closed hearing where officials were disputing the president's account of his Ukraine dealings. On Capitol Hill, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
We are hearing now about the unintended but life-threatening consequences of the intentional power blackouts aimed at preventing the sparking of wildfires in California. Senior citizens in wheelchairs and using walkers at a low-income apartment complex north of San Francisco are talking about being trapped in pitch-black stairways, hallways, and elevators that shut down. They all say they were without guidance from their property management company or the utility behind the blackout. Governor Gavin Newsom faults Pacific Gas and Electric for not being clear about its power cuts.
They were given just 4 hours of notice by PG&E. Wasn't on the original list.
For those elderly residents, it was terrifying. One woman in her 80s tripped over another resident who had herself fallen on the landing in a steep stairwell. Newsom says PG&E will be held accountable. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter. I'm Bob Moon.
You don't usually find the titans of finance, business, and politics sitting around together.
There's been this transfer of royal power and royal prerogative.
But amazingly, they're nearly all here every weekday.
Let's talk about their data. What are you looking for?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
So where does the circuit breaker come from?
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
He's got to respond, doesn't he?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage.